The Galactic Council had what they considered a brilliant solution to their human problem. And by brilliant, we mean the kind of bureaucratic genius that could only emerge from a committee of species so advanced they'd forgotten what common sense looked like. Humans, you see, had been causing what the Council diplomatically termed incidents across the galaxy. These incidents ranged from accidentally starting 3 trade wars by misunderstanding cultural greeting rituals to somehow convincing an entire planet of pacifist philosophers to take up competitive cage fighting. The humans called it cultural exchange. The rest of the galaxy called it a diplomatic nightmare that wouldn't stop breeding. So the Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided to solve this problem the way all good bureaucracies solve problems, by making it someone else's responsibility. Proposal 847 Delta, announced Council Speaker Morgeth, his tentacles writhing with what passed for enthusiasm among his species, calls for the immediate relocation of problematic human offspring to educational facilities. The other council members nodded sagely. They were particularly fond of euphemisms. Educational facilities sounded so much better than death worlds populated by apex predators who consider screaming a dinner bell. The target destination, Vexar Prime, a charming little world where the dominant species had evolved specifically to hunt things that thought they were the dominant species. The hunting clans of Vexar had never encountered prey that didn't have the good sense to run away and die properly. They were about to get a very educational experience themselves. The first transport ship descended through Vexar's perpetually overcast sky like a metallic teardrop, its cargo bay containing what the manifest listed as 3 educational specimens. The reality was somewhat different. 12-year-old Luna Vance, who had been caught teaching advanced mathematics to a supposedly primitive alien tribe, and 10-year-old twins Knox and Wade Fletcher, whose crime had been convincing an entire space station's security force to participate in what they called hide and seek, but which had resulted in the temporary paralysis of interstellar traffic for 6 hours. Luna pressed her face against the transport's viewport, watching the alien landscape rush past. Where most species would see certain death in the form of crystalline trees that could slice through steel and atmospheric conditions that could dissolve most known materials, Luna saw what appeared to be a very interesting puzzle. "Wow," she said, her voice filled with the kind of wonder that made adults nervous. "Look at those mineral formations. Knox, are you getting readings on this?" Knox Fletcher, whose idea of playground equipment involved dismantled electronics and gravity-defying construction projects, was indeed getting readings. His improvised scanner, built from parts of 3 different devices he'd borrowed during processing, was practically singing with excitement. "Luna, this place is amazing!" Knox's voice cracked with preteen enthusiasm. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. I think those crystal formations might actually be some kind of natural superconductor array." His twin Wade was pressed against the opposite viewport, making what sounded suspiciously like attempt at animal noises. Wade had a gift for languages that extended beyond the traditionally verbal. He could mimic everything from the mating calls of Andromedan swamp beasts to the territorial warnings of gas-giant sky whales. Right now, he was working on what appeared to be a conversation with something outside. "Wade," Luna called, "what are you talking to?" "I think it's trying to warn us about something," Wade replied, completely unconcerned. "But its dialect is really interesting. It's got these harmonic undertones that suggest pack coordination. Oh, and I think it's hungry." The transport pilot, a veteran of 43 successful disposal missions, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. In his experience, Cargo that showed this level of curiosity about their destination tended to complicate things. Cargo was supposed to be terrified, not taking geological surveys and attempting interspecies communication. "Initiating final descent," he announced, hoping his voice didn't betray the growing suspicion that this particular mission was going to end up in his therapy records. The landing site had been chosen with what the council considered appropriate irony: a clearing in the heart of hunting clan territory, surrounded by the kind of terrain that had evolved specifically to eat things. The pilot released the cargo bay doors remotely and departed with the kind of haste typically reserved for escaping black holes. Luna, Knox, and Wade found themselves standing in what most rational beings would recognize as a very beautiful place to die. The air shimmered with energy discharges from the crystal formations. The ground beneath their feet hummed with subtle vibrations that suggested large, mobile things were taking an interest in their arrival. The lighting had that perfect cinematic quality that made everything look dramatic and vaguely ominous. "Well," Luna said, shouldering the survival pack that contained enough rations for 3 days, and a manual written in a language none of them could read, "this is cozy." Knox was already kneeling next to what appeared to be a rock, but was giving off readings that suggested it was anything but geological. "Luna, I think we're standing on some kind of massive technological construct. The whole clearing might be artificial." Wade, meanwhile, had wandered to the edge of the clearing and was making increasingly complex vocalizations at the forest. The forest, rather alarmingly, was starting to respond. Guys?" Wade's voice carried a note of excitement rather than the terror most species would consider appropriate. "I think something really big is coming to say hello." The something in question emerged from the crystal forest with the kind of dramatic timing that suggested either perfect predatory instincts or a flair for theatrical entrances. Kulneth stood nearly 3 meters tall, his forearms ending in claws that could rend steel, his hide covered in scars that told stories of 1,000 successful hunts. His eyes, 6 of them, arranged in a pattern that allowed for perfect depth perception and peripheral awareness, fixed on the 3 small beings who had appeared in his territory. Behind him, moving with the fluid grace of apex predators, came the rest of his hunting party. Vashtar, his second-in-command, possessed the kind of lethal elegance that made veteran soldiers reconsider their career choices. The others, 8 hunters who had never encountered prey that didn't have the good sense to flee, spread out in a formation that would have made military tacticians weep with professional appreciation. Luna looked up at Kulneth with the kind of direct eye contact that most prey species instinctively avoided. Then she smiled. "Hello?" she said, in perfectly clear standard, as if she were greeting a neighbor rather than a creature that could end her existence with casual ease. "I'm Luna. These are my friends Knox and Wade. We seem to be a bit lost." Kulneth had been hunting for most of his considerable lifespan. He had stalked prey across crystal canyons and through electromagnetic storms. He had faced down creatures that existed partially in alternate dimensions, and things that could manipulate gravity as a defense mechanism. He had never, however, encountered prey that introduced itself politely and admitted to being lost. The moment stretched with the kind of tension that usually preceded either violence or something much stranger. Knox chose that moment to approach one of the crystal formations and begin taking detailed readings with his improvised scanner. Wade had apparently struck up what sounded like a genuine conversation with something in the forest canopy. Vashitar moved closer to Kulneth, her own predatory instincts somewhat confused by the situation. In her experience, prey either ran, fought, or occasionally tried to negotiate. It did not typically conduct geological surveys or attempt to learn the local language in real time. "Small ones," Kulneth rumbled, his voice carrying harmonics that could shatter glass at the right frequency. "You are in the hunting grounds of Clan Kuloneth. This is not a place for soft things." Luna tilted her head, considering this information with the kind of analytical approach that suggested she was solving a problem rather than facing imminent death. "That's fascinating," she said. "A territorial hunting culture with what appears to be a clan-based social structure. Knox, are you recording this? The sociological implications are incredible." Knox looked up from his scanner, his face bright with discovery. "Luna, these aren't just crystal formations. They're some kind of communications array. I think the whole forest might be networked. That's brilliant. The bandwidth capabilities must be enormous." Wade had apparently reached some kind of understanding with his conversational partner, because he turned back to the group with obvious excitement. "The flyers say there are hot springs about 2 kilometers north," he announced cheerfully. "And apparently there's some kind of communal gathering space near the largest crystal cluster. They're curious about us too." Kuloneth felt something he had never experienced in decades of hunting. Complete bewilderment. These small beings, clearly prey species by any reasonable classification, were treating his hunting grounds like a tourist destination. They showed no fear, demonstrated obvious intelligence, and appeared to be genuinely interested in learning about his world. Vashitar stepped forward, her claws extending in what should have been a threatening gesture. Luna looked up at her with bright interest. "Your movement patterns are incredibly efficient," Luna observed. "The way you distribute your weight must give you perfect balance on almost any terrain. And your claw configuration suggests you can manipulate objects with considerable precision, despite their obvious combat applications." Vashitar found herself retracting her claws and actually examining her own hands with new interest. In her entire adult life, no one had ever complimented her combat efficiency as if it were an engineering achievement. Knox had wandered over to examine Kulneth's weapon harness, his scanner beeping with increasing excitement. "The material science here is incredible," Knox said, apparently addressing his comments to the universe in general. "This alloy shouldn't be possible with standard metallurgy. How do you achieve this kind of flexibility while maintaining structural integrity?" Kulneth looked down at the small being who was conducting a materials analysis of his hunting gear. The question was clearly genuine, born of scientific curiosity rather than tactical intelligence gathering. Wade had somehow gotten into a detailed discussion with one of the other hunters about optimal vocal projection techniques for long-distance communication. The hunter, a veteran of 30 successful hunts, was actually demonstrating different call variations. The sun was beginning to set, casting the crystal forest in shades of gold and amber that made the whole scene look like something from an adventure story. The kind where unlikely friendships were forged and galaxies were saved through the power of understanding. Luna was still studying the hunting party with obvious fascination. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "we were supposed to be educational specimens, but I think we might be learning more than anyone expected." Kulneth felt something shift in the fundamental structure of his understanding. These were not prey. They were not threats. They were something he had never encountered before. Genuinely curious beings who looked at his world, his dangerous, lethal world, and saw wonders worth understanding. "Small Luna," he said, his voice gentler than it had been in living memory. "The sun sets. The night brings different dangers." Luna brightened, as if he'd just offered to show her his stamp collection. "Really? What kind of dangers? Are they seasonal, or more of a constant environmental factor?" And that was how the Galactic Council's brilliant solution to their human problem encountered its first minor complication. The humans were making friends. What happened next would have given the Galactic Council's behavioral specialists a collective aneurysm if they'd been present to witness it, which, fortunately for their cardiovascular health, they were not. The hunting clan of Kulneth had developed their predatory instincts over millions of years of evolutionary refinement. They could track prey across continents, coordinate attacks with military precision, and had never encountered a situation they couldn't resolve through the strategic application of superior force and razor-sharp claws. They were not, however, prepared for Luna Vance's organizational skills. "So," Luna said, settling herself cross-legged on a crystal formation that hummed with barely contained energy, "if I understand correctly, your hunting parties typically operate on a rotation schedule based on prey migration patterns and territorial agreements with neighboring clans." Kulneth found himself nodding before he realized he was participating in what appeared to be a management consultation. "The seasons dictate much," he rumbled. "When the great herds move through the canyon passes, we hunt. When they retreat to the deep forests, we wait." "But that's incredibly inefficient," Luna said with the kind of helpful enthusiasm that made experienced administrators break out in cold sweats. "You're basically operating on a feast or famine model when you could optimize your resource acquisition through strategic diversification." Vashatar, who had been observing this exchange with growing fascination, found herself asking, "Strategic diversification?" Knox looked up from where he was attempting to reverse engineer a piece of hunting equipment. "She means you guys are putting all your eggs in one basket," he explained cheerfully. "Luna's really good at finding better ways to do things. She reorganized our entire education facility's resource allocation system and improved efficiency by 200%. Before they shipped us off to educational facilities," Wade added, somehow managing to make air quotes while maintaining a conversation with what appeared to be a small, crystalline creature that had perched on his shoulder. Luna had pulled out what looked like a standard-issue survival tablet and was making notes. "What's your current success rate on major hunts?" 73%, Kulneth answered automatically, then paused to wonder why he was providing hunting statistics to prey. "And your injury rate?" "Acceptable losses," Vashatar replied, though her tone suggested the definition of acceptable might be somewhat flexible. Luna made more notes, her expression thoughtful. "What if I told you I could improve your success rate to over 90% while reducing injuries by approximately 60%? The hunting party exchanged glances. In their culture, such claims typically preceded either elaborate deception or religious revelation. Sometimes both. "How?" Kulneth asked, his curiosity overriding his predatory instincts. Luna's smile was the kind that had historically preceded significant changes to the status quo. "Game theory," she said simply, "combined with predictive modeling and resource optimization. But first, I'd need to understand your current tactical approaches." Knox had successfully dismantled and reassembled one of their communication devices, improving its range by what his scanner suggested was approximately 40%. "This is really elegant engineering," he said admiringly. "But you could get better performance with some minor modifications to the resonance chamber." The hunter, whose equipment Knox had just improved, was staring at the device with the expression of someone whose worldview had just been gently but thoroughly restructured. Wade, meanwhile, had apparently become the official liaison with the local wildlife. His shoulder passenger had been joined by what appeared to be a small flock of aerial scouts, and he was conducting what sounded like a detailed briefing on human cultural practices. "They want to know about our music," Wade announced. Apparently, they have something similar, but it's based on electromagnetic harmonics instead of acoustic vibrations. That's fascinating, Luna said, making yet another note. Interspecies artistic expression could be a significant cultural bridge. Wade, see if you can learn their compositional structure. Knox, how's the equipment analysis coming? Really well, Knox replied, his hands deep in the mechanism of what appeared to be a portable energy weapon. Their power cells are incredibly efficient, but the focusing array could be improved with better crystalline alignment. I think I can boost the output without increasing the energy consumption. Vashatar moved closer, her scientific curiosity warring with her predatory caution. You understand our technologies? Knox looked up with the kind of innocent enthusiasm that had historically preceded significant advances in applied physics. Not yet, he said cheerfully. But your engineering principles are really clever. I just need to figure out how you're managing the quantum resonance cascades in the focusing matrix. Kulneth realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. His hunting party was being consulted. These small beings weren't trying to escape or negotiate for their lives. They were treating his clan like colleagues in some vast collaborative project. The sun had fully set, and the crystal forest had come alive with bioluminescent displays that turned the landscape into something from a fever dream. Most prey species would have been paralyzed with terror by now. The humans had apparently decided this was the perfect time for a cultural exchange program. Luna had somehow convinced half the hunting party to participate in what she called tactical scenario planning. She had them arranged around a makeshift map she'd constructed from colored stones and crystalline formations, walking through various hunting approaches while she took notes and made suggestions. So when the prey takes the high ground advantage, she was saying, instead of direct assault, you could use Knox's communication array improvements to coordinate a multi-vector approach that leverages your natural speed advantages while minimizing exposure to defensive positions. The hunters found themselves nodding along as if this made perfect sense, which, disturbingly, it did. Knox had attracted a small group of warriors who were fascinated by his modifications to their equipment. His scanner had identified 17 different ways to improve their existing technologies, and he was explaining each one with the kind of patient enthusiasm usually reserved for favorite hobbies. The really cool thing, Knox was saying as he adjusted something in the power core of a hunting spear, is that your natural materials are way better than most synthetic alternatives. You just need to optimize the configuration to take advantage of their unique properties. The spear's owner activated the weapon and watched in amazement as the energy blade extended nearly twice its previous length, while consuming less power than before. Wade had somehow organized an impromptu concert. The hunting clan's communication calls, when combined with human musical principles, had created something that sounded like a cross between a symphony and a battle hymn. It was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, which seemed to perfectly capture the essential nature of their hosts. But it was the small incident that occurred just after midnight that truly changed everything. Luna had been examining one of the crystal formations when her foot slipped on the energy-slick surface. She fell awkwardly, her leg twisting beneath her, with the sharp crack that universally signifies broken bones. The sound cut through the peaceful evening like a blade through silk. Luna's cry of pain triggered something primal in every member of the hunting clan. But instead of the predatory response that millions of years of evolution should have produced, they experienced something entirely different: protective instinct. Vashatar reached Luna first, her movements gentle despite her natural weaponry. Her scanning abilities, evolved for tracking prey, identified the injury with medical precision. fractured tibia, minor tearing in the surrounding muscle tissue, significant pain, but not life-threatening. Small Luna. Vashitar's voice carried harmonics of concern that she hadn't used since her own offspring had been young. Be still. The bone is broken. Knox and Wade were at their friend's side immediately, their faces showing the kind of worry that made the surrounding hunters feel protective, urges they didn't fully understand. "It's okay," Luna said through gritted teeth, her voice steady despite obvious pain. "It's just a simple fracture. I'll be fine." But Kulneth was already moving, his massive form surprisingly gentle as he lifted the injured child. "The healing chambers," he rumbled to Vashitar. "Quickly!" What followed was something that would have required extensive psychological analysis to fully understand. An entire hunting party, genetically programmed to view small, vulnerable beings as prey, instead treating an injured human child with the same protective care they would show their own young. The healing chambers were a testament to Vexar biotechnology, crystalline structures that could accelerate cellular regeneration and reduce healing times by orders of magnitude. They were typically reserved for injured clan members after particularly difficult hunts. As Luna's leg was encased in the healing matrix, Knox and Wade maintained a constant vigil that their hosts found inexplicably touching. The boys' obvious concern for their friend triggered something in the hunter's social instincts that went deeper than rational thought. "She will heal," Vashitar assured the twins, her voice carrying the same gentle harmonics she would use with frightened younglings. "Our healing chambers are very effective." Knox looked up at her with eyes that held tears he was trying not to shed. "Thank you," he said simply. She's really important to us. We don't have anyone else." The words hit the hunting party like a physical blow. These weren't just random prey specimens. They were a pack, a family unit. And one of their members had been injured while under Clan Kulneth's protection. Wade had curled up next to Luna's healing chamber, humming one of the hybrid melodies he'd created with the clan's musicians. The sound was designed to be soothing, and it seemed to be working. Luna's vital signs, displayed on the chamber's bio-readouts, were stabilizing. Kulneth found himself standing guard over the healing chamber with the same intensity he would bring to protecting his own territory. The realization that he had begun to think of these small beings as his responsibility came as something of a shock. "Clanfather," one of his hunters approached hesitantly. "The small ones, they are not prey." "No," Kulneth agreed, his voice thoughtful. "They are not prey. But what they are—" He paused, searching for words to describe something his language had never needed to express. "What they are is ours to protect." Vashtar nodded, understanding flooding her features. "Pack bonded," she said, using a term that described the deepest level of social connection their species could experience. "They have claimed us, and we have accepted." It was a biological impossibility, a sociological anomaly, and a diplomatic incident that would eventually require its own branch of xenological study. 3 human children had somehow managed to domesticate an entire hunting party of apex predators through the simple expedient of treating them like friends. Luna's eyes fluttered open as the healing matrix completed its work. Her leg was completely healed, though she'd probably be tired for a few days while her body finished integrating the cellular repairs. "How do you feel, small Luna?" Vashitar asked, her concern evident. Luna sat up carefully, testing her leg. "Much better, thank you. That's incredible technology. The regeneration rate must be—" She paused, noticing the way everyone was looking at her. "Is everything okay?" Knox and Wade exchanged glances. They had both noticed the change in their host's behavior. The hunting party was acting less like predators who had captured prey and more like family members who had just been through a scare together. "Luna," Wade said carefully, "I think something important just happened." Luna looked around at the circle of concerned faces, some human, some distinctly not, and felt something settle into place that she hadn't even realized was missing. "Yeah," she said softly, "I think you're right." Outside, the crystal forest hummed with bioluminescent activity, and somewhere in the distance, other hunting clans were beginning to notice that Clan Kulneth's territory had gone unusually quiet. Not the quiet of successful hunters, but the quiet of a family settling in for the night. The Galactic Council's disposal operation was now officially a complete failure, but none of the beings currently gathered in the healing chamber seemed particularly concerned about bureaucratic disappointment. They had accidentally created something much more interesting: a family. 6 months later, Clan Kulneth had become something that would have required an entirely new category in xenological classification systems. What had once been a fearsome hunting party had transformed into something that defied every known model of apex predator behavior. The first sign that things had gone wonderfully, terribly wrong was the flower crowns. Vashitar stood at the entrance to their territorial boundaries, her lethal form adorned with a circlet of crystalline blooms that Knox had engineered to resonate with her natural bioelectric field. The flowers pulsed with soft light in harmony with her heartbeat, creating an effect that was simultaneously beautiful and completely ridiculous on a creature that could disembowel a battle mech. "Vashitar," called Luna from her makeshift command center, a crystalline formation she'd converted into what appeared to be a cross between a tactical operations center and a very advanced homework station. "The morning patrol reports are coming in. Want to review the efficiency metrics?" Vashitar's response would have horrified her younger self. She practically bounced over to examine Luna's charts with the enthusiasm of a student eager to see her test scores. The new rotation schedule increased successful track and locate operations by 38%, Luna announced, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a job well done. "And the communication improvements Knox implemented have reduced coordination errors to essentially zero." Knox looked up from where he was teaching a group of young hunters the finer points of equipment maintenance. His students, creatures that had been designed by evolution to be perfect killing machines, were taking careful notes on harmonic resonance calibration with the dedication of engineering students. "The power efficiency improvements are holding steady, too," Knox added. "We're getting 40% better performance across all systems, and the failure rate on hunting equipment has dropped to basically nothing." Wade had somehow become the clan's unofficial emotional counselor. He was currently mediating a dispute between two hunters who had gotten into an argument about optimal territory marking techniques. His approach involved a lot of active listening and what appeared to be group therapy exercises. "So what I'm hearing," Wade said in the patient tone of someone who had dealt with more than his share of interpersonal conflicts, "is that you both want the same thing: clear territorial boundaries that minimize conflicts with neighboring clans. Have you considered a collaborative approach to boundary maintenance?" The two hunters, who had been on the verge of engaging in what their species considered a traditional dominance challenge, found themselves nodding thoughtfully and discussing collaborative solutions. Kulneth watched this transformation with feelings that ranged from pride to existential bewilderment. His hunting party had become more effective, more efficient, and more socially cohesive than any clan in recorded history. They had also developed what could only be described as hobbies, specifically hobbies that involved art projects, group singing, and something Luna called team-building exercises, that had somehow made his hunters more coordinated than elite military units. The real test of their evolution came when the other clans started to notice. It began with rumors, whispers that Clan Kulneth had gone soft, that their hunting grounds had become suspiciously peaceful, that strange sounds, music, laughter, and what appeared to be educational lectures were coming from their territory. The rumors attracted attention from Clan Morgath, led by Chieftain Kethvar, whose approach to problem-solving typically involved significant amounts of violence applied with surgical precision. Brother Kulneth, Kethvar, announced as his hunting party emerged from the Crystal Forest, "We come to offer assistance. The other clans speak of changes in your territory." Kethvar's warriors spread out in formation, their weapons ready and their expressions showing the kind of professional concern that preceded hostile takeovers. They had come expecting to find Clan Kulneth weakened by whatever had caused their behavioral changes. What they found instead was a hunting party that moved with unprecedented coordination, took defensive positions with mathematical precision, and appeared to be following tactical instructions from a 12-year-old human child. Morgath formation, classic pincer approach, Luna observed from her command position, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. "Nox, can you give me readings on their equipment loadout?" Nox's scanner swept the approaching clan with professional thoroughness. "Standard hunting gear, but well-maintained. Energy weapons are showing optimal charge levels. They're not here for negotiations." Wade had somehow gotten close enough to the Morgath warriors to initiate what appeared to be a diplomatic conversation. His language skills had advanced considerably over the past months, and he was now fluent in 3 different clan dialects. "They're here because of territorial concerns," Wade reported back. "They think we've been compromised by some kind of external threat. They're actually trying to help." Luna's tactical analysis shifted immediately. "Defensive posture, but non-threatening," she instructed. "Vashatar, can you handle the initial contact? Nox, power down anything that might look aggressive. Wade, see if you can establish communication protocols." Kulneth watched his hunting party execute Luna's instructions with the kind of seamless precision that military commanders spent decades trying to achieve. The transformation was complete. They had become something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. They had become a functional hybrid society. Vashatar approached Kethvar with the fluid grace that had always characterized her movement, but her posture was diplomatic rather than predatory. "Clan brother," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of greeting rather than challenge. "You are welcome in our territory, but perhaps we should clarify some misunderstandings." Kethvar's confusion was evident. Vashatar's response was appropriate, but something was fundamentally different about the way she carried herself. She moved with the same lethal efficiency, but there was an underlying confidence that suggested she was operating from a position of strength rather than responding to a threat. "The rumors," Kethvar said carefully, "speak of changes, of softness." Luna chose that moment to step forward. Her appearance, small, obviously young, clearly not a predator species, should have triggered every aggressive instinct in the Morgath hunting party. Instead, something in her demeanor suggested that attacking her would be a very serious mistake. "I'm Luna," she said, with the kind of polite directness that had historically preceded significant diplomatic breakthroughs. "And I think there's been a misunderstanding about what soft means." Nox and Wade flanked her, their positions casual, but somehow giving the impression of a coordinated unit. Behind them, Clan Kulneth arranged themselves in what appeared to be a relaxed formation, but which actually provided optimal coverage and defensive positioning. "These are the small ones," Cathvar said, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "The prey specimens." "Actually," Luna said cheerfully, "we prefer integration specialists. And we're not prey so much as consultants." What happened next would have required a team of xenopsychologists to properly analyze. Luna proceeded to give Cathvar and his hunting party a presentation on optimization theory, resource management, and what she called collaborative efficiency models. Knox demonstrated the equipment improvements that had increased Clan Kulneth's effectiveness by nearly 200%. Wade performed a cultural exchange that included music, language lessons, and what appeared to be group therapy techniques adapted for apex predator psychology. By the time the sun reached its zenith, Clan Morgath was participating in what Luna called cooperative tactical exercises that had somehow evolved into elaborate team-building activities. "This is impossible," Cathvar muttered to Kulneth as they watched their hunting parties collaborate on a complex coordination exercise that looked like a cross between military training and an interpretive dance performance. "I thought so too," Kulneth replied, his voice carrying notes of wonder that hadn't been there 6 months ago. "But the small ones, they see possibilities we never considered." The real demonstration came when a genuine threat appeared. A pack of crystal wraiths, energy-based predators that typically required coordinated clan efforts to repel. They emerged from the forest's electromagnetic shadows with the kind of timing that suggested the universe had a sense of dramatic irony. "Contact," Knox announced, his scanners identifying the threat signature. Crystal wraiths estimated 12 entities approaching from the northeast Crystal Grove. Luna's response was immediate and professional. "Defensive Formation Delta, Hybrid Tactics. Knox, configure the resonance scramblers. Wade, see if you can establish communication. They might be territorial rather than aggressive. Vashatar, coordinate with Cathvar's warriors. We're going to show them how interclan cooperation works." What followed was less a battle than a demonstration of applied tactical theory. The two hunting parties moved as a single coordinated unit, their actions synchronized through communication improvements, equipment modifications, and strategic positioning that turned their natural advantages into overwhelming force multiplication. The Crystal Wraiths, faced with an unprecedented level of organized resistance, withdrew after a brief engagement that resulted in 0 casualties and maximum efficiency. Cathvar stared at the retreating energy signatures with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been gently but thoroughly reorganized. "How?" he asked. Luna was already back at her command station, making notes on combat effectiveness and areas for improvement. "Coordination," she said simply, "plus really good equipment and excellent team dynamics. Your hunters are incredibly skilled. They just needed better tactical frameworks." Knox was examining the energy readings from the encounter with obvious satisfaction. "The hybrid weapon configurations worked perfectly," he announced. "Power efficiency was optimal, and the coordinated targeting eliminated waste and overlap." Wade had somehow struck up a conversation with one of the Morgath warriors about the psychological benefits of collaborative combat techniques. As the day progressed, it became clear that something irreversible had occurred. Clan Morgath was experiencing the same transformation that had overtaken Clan Kulneth. They were discovering that cooperation, optimization, and what Luna called social integration didn't make them weaker. It made them unstoppable. By evening, Cathvar's hunting party was wearing flower crowns and participating in what appeared to be a strategic planning session that looked suspiciously like a very advanced study group. "The other clans," Cathvar said thoughtfully, will need to understand these changes. Luna looked up from her ever-present notes with the kind of smile that had historically preceded significant expansions of project scope. "Actually," she said, "I've been thinking about scalability. Wade's been working on communication protocols that could facilitate interclan cooperation on a much larger scale. And Knox has some ideas about resource sharing that could benefit everyone." Knox nodded enthusiastically. "The technological applications alone could advance your entire civilization by several centuries. And that's just the engineering aspects." Wade had apparently been thinking about the sociological implications. "Plus, the cultural exchange possibilities are incredible. Imagine what you could accomplish with coordinated efforts across multiple clans." Kulaneth and Kethvar exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of unspoken communication. They were both beginning to realize that their small consultants had ambitions that extended well beyond individual clan optimization. "Small Luna," Kulaneth said carefully, "when you speak of larger-scale cooperation." Luna's smile widened with the kind of innocent enthusiasm that had historically preceded major changes to the status quo. "Oh, I'm thinking much bigger than individual clans. I'm thinking about what happens when the entire planet starts working together." The crystal forest hummed with bioluminescent activity as night fell, and somewhere in the distance other clans were beginning to notice that the territorial boundaries in their region had become unusually quiet and cooperative. The Galactic Council's disposal operation had officially become the most successful cultural integration project in recorded history. Not that anyone was keeping track of such things, yet. The Galactic Council delegation arrived 6 months later, expecting to collect trophies and file a successful disposal report. What they found instead required an entirely new classification system for bureaucratic disasters. Ambassador Lexna stepped off the transport ship onto what should have been a charred wasteland littered with small bones. Instead, she found herself in what appeared to be a thriving interspecies settlement complete with educational facilities, trade infrastructure, and what looked suspiciously like a daycare center. "This," she announced to her accompanying staff, "is not in the manual." Her confusion deepened when the official greeting party consisted of a 3-meter-tall apex predator wearing a friendship bracelet and speaking broken standard, accompanied by 3 human children who appeared to be conducting some kind of diplomatic briefing. "Welcome to Vexar Prime Cultural Integration Zone," Luna said, with the kind of professional enthusiasm that made career diplomats nervous. "I'm Luna Vance, Director of Interspecies Cooperation. These are my colleagues, Knox and Wade Fletcher, heads of technology transfer and cultural exchange, respectively." Kulaneth stepped forward, his massive form somehow managing to convey diplomatic courtesy despite being designed for efficient violence. "Honored council speakers," he rumbled, his standard heavily accented but clearly comprehensible, "we are pleased to welcome you to our territories." Ambassador Lexna stared at the scene with the expression of someone whose carefully structured universe had just been casually rearranged by forces beyond her comprehension. "You're supposed to be dead," she said faintly. Knox looked up from his scanner with obvious confusion. "Why would we be dead? This place is amazing. The learning opportunities alone are incredible." Wade had somehow acquired what appeared to be a small crystalline pet that was currently perched on his shoulder like a very geometric parrot. "Plus, everyone here is really nice once you get to know them. They just needed help with their communication protocols." Luna consulted her ever-present tablet. "Actually, we should probably discuss the broader implications of your disposal program. We've been conducting some analysis, and the results are interesting." What followed was a presentation that would eventually require its own wing in the Council's psychological trauma treatment facility. Luna had charts. Detailed, comprehensive charts that documented the EDD transformation of not just Clan Kulneth, but 17 other clans that had undergone similar integration processes. The data showed unprecedented improvements in resource efficiency, territorial cooperation, and what Luna called quality of life indicators. Knox demonstrated technological advances that had improved everything from hunting equipment to communication systems. His modifications had created a planetary network that allowed for coordination across entire continents. Wade performed a cultural exchange that included music, language, and what appeared to be group therapy techniques that had somehow eliminated inter-clan warfare across the entire Northern Hemisphere. "This is the 23rd disposal operation," Luna announced, with the kind of casual authority that made administrative personnel question their career choices. "We've been in contact with the other locations." The Council delegation felt the universe shift slightly around them. "All 23 operations have resulted in successful cultural integration projects," Luna continued. "The humans you've been disposing of have essentially created a network of peaceful, cooperative societies across some of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds." Knox nodded enthusiastically. "The technological sharing alone has advanced these civilizations by centuries, and the social cooperation models are being replicated across multiple star systems." Wade had apparently been appointed as spokesperson for what he called the Integration Network. "We've been thinking," he said with the kind of innocent enthusiasm that historically preceded major policy changes, that maybe the Council should consider a different approach to human cultural exchange. Ambassador Lexna realized she was witnessing something that would require entirely new categories of diplomatic protocol. The Council's disposal program hadn't eliminated the human problem. It had accidentally created a network of hybrid societies that were more advanced, more peaceful, and more cooperative than anything in the galaxy's recorded history. "You've domesticated death worlds?" she said weakly. Luna looked thoughtful. "That's an interesting way to put it. We prefer to think of it as collaborative problem-solving with enhanced efficiency outcomes." Kulneth stepped forward, his massive form radiating protective authority. "The small ones are clan-bonded," he announced. "They remain with us." Behind him, representatives from multiple clans nodded agreement. The Council delegation found themselves facing what appeared to be a united front of apex predators who had somehow been convinced to participate in a diplomatic process. "The Council," Lexna said carefully, "will need to reassess our approach to human cultural integration." Luna brightened with the kind of enthusiasm that had historically preceded significant improvements to bureaucratic efficiency. "Actually, we've prepared some recommendations for optimizing your current programs. The data suggests that collaborative placement, rather than disposal operations, could improve outcomes by over 300%. Knox had already started scanning the Council's equipment with obvious interest. Plus, your transportation logistics could be significantly improved with some minor modifications to your fleet configuration. Wade was attempting to initiate what appeared to be cultural exchange protocols with the Council staff. As the sun set over Vexar Prime, painting the crystal forest in shades of gold and amber, Ambassador Lexna realized she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. A galactic civilization where the most dangerous worlds had become centers of cooperation and learning. The Council's disposal program was being quietly reclassified as the Galactic Rehabilitation and Integration Initiative. The humans were being officially designated as Cultural Integration Specialists. And somewhere in the distance, other disposal sites were reporting similar developments. Luna looked up from her tablet as the council delegation prepared to depart. "Oh, and Ambassador? We'll need to discuss resource allocation for the expanded program. We have some ideas about scaling these integration models to other sectors." The universe, it seemed, had developed a sense of humor, and the punchline was that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to survive impossible odds. It was their ability to make friends with them.